So today I'm going to be answering a question. And before I answer this question, I want to thank everyone that reaches out to me to ask a question. Um, I I get a lot of questions from people, and for some people, you might feel, oh, it takes me quite a while to get to your question, and I want to beg for you to be patient with me because for me, I do not answer questions based on when I get them. Number one, I try to answer question based on the level of spiritual clarity I have on any question. So it's not about first come, first served a lot of times. It's about, do I have clarity? If I don't have clarity on it at that time, I would give it some time and I would see when the clarity would drop. So I don't try to force questions or force clarity on any question. I don't try to deeply think about questions. I, a lot of times, wait for answers to be revealed to me, for lack of a better word, for to be revealed to me, and I would go from there. So if I haven't answered your question, I haven't ignored your question. Trust me, because I've had some people say, "Oh, I've sent you a question. Please don't forget my question." I haven't forgotten your questions. I never forget people's questions. They they haunt me. I'll tell you that. I never forget it. The spirit always brings it to me, tells me you haven't answered this person's question, you haven't answered, and then I get some insight, some clarity, some spiritual direction to how to answer the question, and then I go about answering the question. So it's not a first come, first served basis, and it's not a deprioritization of your question. Your question is actually very important to me, and I get a lot of. I am the first audience of the podcast, so when I learn, when I'm teaching, I am learning, and that's the truth, and that's why I call myself first a student. I am learning even by teaching. So a lot of people think that when I teach on my podcast, these are things that I know and these are things that I have been practicing. Some of them aren't. Some of them are things that even as I'm speaking them, they are convicting me too. And I'm saying, Tola, you need to apply these things to your life or improve in this area of your life also. So we are learning together. So I'm going to be reading out a question today. But for those that want to send me questions, want to ask questions, I'll put out my phone number again. It's +234 80 232 66249. Please send me a WhatsApp message. Don't call that number, please. Send me a WhatsApp message. If you also want to ask questions or you want to see or listen to other questions I have answered in the past, I would advise that you join my Telegram group. So if you send me a WhatsApp message, you can tell me, oh, I have a question, or I want to join the Telegram group, or both. I will be more than happy to share the link or the invite to my Telegram group. And that's a Q&A Telegram group where I've been answering questions for, I think, about a year, if not over a year right now. And so you can go and listen to those questions. Some of those questions that I've answered, I have not posted on my podcast. So my podcast is not a compendium of all the questions I've answered. I don't think it even has up to half of all the questions I've answered. But if you want to see all the questions that people have asked and I've answered, please join my Telegram group. I think you would enjoy and you would learn from some of these questions I've answered in the past. So today I'll be answering a question and I'll be keeping the person that sent this question to me anonymous. So he says, I grew up in a family that is very spiritual and religious. In fact, growing up, we had devotions every morning and never skipped church, even weekly activities. But I discovered that I was just forced into it. This showed when I left home and started living alone. I have not been to church for almost a year now. It's not like I hate it. I just feel that I can build my relationship with God without being in church. I have noticed that this has an effect on my spiritual life. Please help me get deep understanding on why we ought to go to church. This is a good question. And I want to thank the person that sent me this question, number one, for being generous with this question and allowing me to talk on this question in this public podcast. It's a great question. And I would like to start from the bottom of the question. Clarity about whether or not to go to church. And I will work my way up the question. So I won't start from where you started from. I will start from the last question. Why is it important for us to go to church? Is it important for us to go to church? Is it? Because, I've spoken to a lot of people that have told me, there's no need. Why am I going to church? No need to go to a church. I don't need to go to a church. As a matter of fact, I joined this church online. I joined this church in the US, this church in Australia, this church in Singapore, this church in, the UK online. I don't go anywhere on Sundays. And some people don't even join anybody. They just read their Bibles on their own at home any day they want to. You understand? Sunday is no different. And we have some people, Sunday is just an extra day, weekend, sleep, go out, play sports, all those things. Why is it important that we go to church? Is it important to start with? I want to start by saying it is absolutely important to go to church. It is absolutely important to go to church. I will say this at the risk of sounding old school, at the risk of sounding legalistic. I'll say that at the risk. A lot of people might say, man, that's so old school, go to church. What does that mean? Come on. We don't need to. It's optional. I personally don't think so. I think it's important. I think we have more to lose from not going to church than we have to gain from not going to church. I think it's absolutely important. I think sometime last year I was reading a book. It's a very interesting book. I've read it twice now. That's how good the book is. It's called The Progress Paradox: How Life Gets Better While People Feel Worse, by a man called Greg Easterbrook. The Progress Paradox: How Life Gets Better While People Feel Worse. So the main title of the book is The Progress Paradox. But in the end, it talks about how life has gotten better for people in the West, in the western part of the world. But the people feel worse. It's a great book because this man has taken his time to analyze living in the West, and he used the US as an example, and he looked at it over the past 3 decades. Now, I wrote this book a long time ago, so over the past 3 decades, if you are looking at it from now, really spans all the way back. And he talked about how things were when he was growing up in the very early America, and how things are now in the US. And it talks about all these advancements or advances in technology and the way people live. But then it talks about how society seems to have improved, but people have devolved. And when you read that book, it's good to read that book because it's a warning to every country that is following the footsteps of the United States or other seemingly successful Western countries. And this man, who is a Westerner, talks about how things are failing with the human being in the West, even though they seem to be making advances in terms of technology, in terms of economy. the human being, the human technology is failing. So we have a lot of people. I hear this I see a lot of people talk about it online. They're like, oh, Nigeria, we pray a lot, but then what are we doing? What's happening in our country? But these countries that don't pray a lot, see how they are moving forward, see what's happening. This man is from one of those countries and he's telling us that they are not moving forward as people. He says the people are devolving to nothing more than wildlife. Wildlife. That's what he's talking about. That's what the book talks about. And you see, he talks about a lot of things. But one of the things he talks about there is how the society has systematically taken out the influence of the church and how this is affecting them decades later. It might seem innocuous not to go to church on Sundays. It might seem like, what does it seem traditional? We don't need this. We've moved past this. But then I will have you know, it's not tradition. It is important for the development of man. For you to develop as a person, it is important for you to go to church. It's important. It is absolutely important. You see, what Greg Easterbrook, what he details in that book, as I read the book, I realized that as we begin to take on the culture of the West, we are beginning to take on their diseases too. So he talks about diseases, how their food has changed over the past 30 years and how people have gotten sicker. And I realized that the more we import their food, the more we are importing their diseases too. Diseases that you never heard of in Nigeria have started coming here. He talks about those things. He talks about their attitude, how their attitudes have changed. He talks about when he was growing up, having a car was something that was rare. On a whole street, maybe only one person had a car. And everybody will hitch on that car to go to school or to go and shop. But it says now, in a family, each person has their own car. And it talks about, it talks about education. It talks about when he was growing up, before you find somebody with a university education in a family, you would walk you would walk very far before you find a family that has somebody with university education. But now, when you look at most families, most people not just have one degree, they have two, they have masters, PhD, and stuff like that. And you expect that people are more intelligent, but all they are is intellectual. They are not able to make good decisions. So you see somebody who has a master's degree, a PhD degree, make such a blunder in decision making. The choices they make aren't any better than the people that had just basic education. So he talks about how life has gotten better, but people feel worse. And you see, when he talks about the removal and the separation of people from the establishment of church, when church became optional, when Sunday became one more day to add to Saturday to get your indoor activities done, your laundry, to go and hang out with friends, go and play golf. I stayed in Canada for a while, and it was incredible how Sunday was just a lounging day. You see people go fishing, people go golfing, people go picnicking. And talked about how this happened in the US, and it seemed innocuous. But then there was a departure and an apathy that people started to feel towards each other. And this is what has spiraled out into serial killings that you have in the USA. Serial killings. Serial killings were not a thing in the USA. Nobody would just come and just kill women randomly and do it for about 10 years before they catch him. He tells you that he has killed 100 people. 100 women. Why? Because he just hates women. Pedophilia on the rise. Kidnapping on the rise. School shootings on the rise. A man just walks into a kindergarten where you have young innocent children with a machine gun and kills everybody, anyone he can find moving, shoots them like game, feels no remorse. We never had those things. The US never had the Ted Bundys or the Charles Mansons or the Timothy McVeighs. They never had those things. Those people started creeping up in the US when the US stopped their intimate relationship with this establishment called church. When schools started taking out church prayers, people found it optional to say we don't go to church on Sundays. It affected the people at their very soul. So what I'm going to tell you first of all is that if we begin to adopt this culture in Nigeria, I want to tell you that serial killings will be on the rise. We are already having it in Nigeria, serial killings. Young men killing young women, just killing them. You understand? It never used to happen. Just kill for, before we used to say people don't kill in Nigeria for anything. It's either they want to steal something or take something, but now it started happening. Started killing for no reason. Burying dead bodies within their house, living in it never used to happen. It's happening now. Serial killings will be on the rise. Pedophilia will be on the rise. School shootings will begin to happen. It will begin to happen. It is cause and effect. And from this book by Greg Easterbrook, he's telling us that they are already feeling the effect, and he's telling us where the cause started from, and he's warning the rest of the world: if you follow the cause, you will reap the effect. If we start making that decision to start saying it's not important to go to church, it's not important to pray in school, it's not important to pray on school assembly, it's not important to pray before break in school. You see, when I went to school, on the assembly, we said the Lord's Prayer. At break time, we said a prayer. When we were about to close, we said a prayer. It was not optional, it was compulsory. It built in my generation some fear of God. It helps to sharpen our conscience. It doesn't happen in most schools now. So the apathy is already kicking in. And that's why when you look at generations, you kind of see, you hardly find people in my generation. I'm Gen X, if you're going to look for where Gen X started from. Find them saying they are serial killers, ritual killers. No. We have a fear of blood. Blood? Human blood was sacred. You cannot see blood. When you see your own blood self, you begin to panic. When I was growing up, we couldn't look at dead bodies. When you see a dead body, it's stuck with you. It stuck with you. It tormented you. When you were driving on the road and car hit someone, you see dead body by the road, it tormented you for weeks. But now, people see it every day. On social media, people are seeing people's final moments. You are seeing their last minute. You are seeing their soul leave their bodies. You are seeing heads decapitated. You are seeing people shot. And then you go about your day and even forgot, and you forget what you've seen. You forgot that you saw somebody die. Means nothing. That apathy begin to build. It's very important that we go to church. It grounds the human soul in 3 ways. Because there are 3 things church is important for. And I'll tell you now that it's not about building a relationship with God. So when you tell me that I don't see a need to go to church because I feel like I can build a relationship with God personally, my question is, what other way is there to build a relationship with God apart from personally? The misconception that we build a relationship with God generally is a gross misconception. Church is not for building a relationship with God. Building a relationship with God is a daily thing. It's an abuse of church to say you build your relationship with God on a particular place, in a particular day, in a particular place. You do not build your relationship with God on a particular day, in a particular place, under a particular person. That is not building of relationship with God. So when you say, I don't think I should go to church because I think I can build a relationship with God personally, you are stating what should be. You should build your relationship with God personally every day. This is not what church is for. Church is not a place to build a relationship with God. The institution of the church, people did not gather to build a relationship with God. They gathered for three things. And these three things are for you as a human being and your interaction with other human beings. It is hardly about God. Your relationship with God is personal, it is daily, it is continuous. The first thing, the first essence of the church is to teach you as a human being to serve. Service. One of the reasons we go to church is to learn to serve. That's why if you are listening now, you are going to a church and all you do is go and listen to somebody teach, you are missing out on one of the essence of the church. Everybody should serve in the church. Some people say, can everybody serve in the church? Not everybody can serve. No. Everybody should serve in the church. I'll tell you why everybody is not serving in the church when we get there. But then, everybody should serve. If you are not serving in your church in one capacity or the other, you are missing on the essence of the church. And those are the people that build an apathy. Build that apathy with church and say, why do I need to go anyway? If you are not serving, you'll be detached. We are meant to serve each other. So when we even talk about, we are going to serve God. No, it's not about serving God. We are there to serve each other. Serve each other. Serve each other. So when you serve in security, you are serving to make sure that everybody in the church is secure. When you serve as an usher, you are serving to make sure that everybody is comfortable. When you serve in the choir, you are serving to make sure that everybody's spirit is lifted. Music lifts this demon of depression. When you play an instrument, it lifts someone that has a demon sitting on them. It frees people. It is for people, not particularly for God. We can say it's for God because there's God in every one of us. But when we go to church to serve, we go to serve the God in people. It's for people. When you go to church, you are serving as somebody in the health committee, is to make sure that people come to church and they feel better. When you are serving in the children's department, you serve to make sure that the people's children are raised well and the children feel happy and relaxed in church. We must serve in church. It is from serving in church that we learn to serve in society. When people stop going to church, they stop serving in society. They start working in society. They start laboring in society. They start doing business in society. The society becomes capitalistic. That's why a capitalist society would always tell you not to go to church, because church breaks something in capitalism, which is serving for free without thinking of what you would get back. In fact, capitalism is fighting its way into the church now, when people are saying, if I'm going to sing in the church, you must pay me this amount of money. If I'm going to do this, play drums in the church, you must pay me this. Do you know how good I am at playing the drums or playing the saxophone? If I'm going to sing, you must pay me this. Because people are not serving anymore. People are strategizing and selling in the church. You are selling. What capitalism is about is selling. So people find the church awkward. Why should I give this thing for free? Because the spirit of capitalism has entered a lot of people. So the church has become uncomfortable. But instead of the church to stand its ground, the church has accommodated it. The first thing that the church teaches the human being is to serve while thinking of nothing you are going to get back. You serve because you see the other human being and you feel for them. The early church was about service. First of all, serve. Not about God. It's about human interaction. Building a better society by learning how to serve in church, so that when you go out and people need you, you don't think of a paycheck first. You don't watch people die because you haven't received a bank alert. You learn that from church. The second reason why we go to church, the second thing we have to learn from church is to share. To share. The early church was a place of sharing. Sharing. If someone had anything, they brought it to the church and they shared it together. So that nobody has too much and nobody has too little. Church was a place that made men equal. Check out the early church. That's what it was. A place of sharing. Nobody was to stand out over the other person. Sharing was a place where we learned to share. That what is yours belongs to everybody. That goes against the tenet of capitalism. Capitalism says what is yours is yours. You worked hard for it. Enjoy it. When people stay away from church, the first thing that grabs them is the spirit of capitalism. So the church becomes nothing but a charity case. If they're going to give to it anything at all, they just fling, they donate to it. They're not donating. They're not sharing. You know what it means to just give a donation? Just donate towards it. Like a charity case. Like someone begging for alms. No, that's not sharing. Sharing is taking what you have and spreading it around. That everybody becomes equal in terms of wealth. This is meant to teach us as human beings to take into society the spirit of sharing. Of sharing. When you make money, you share. If we all learned this from church, we would have very little inequality in society. In society. I went somewhere yesterday and I saw somebody in front of their fence, outside their fence, but in front of their fence, around their flower bed. They had planted bananas or plantain and pawpaw. And these things were fruiting. And the first thing I thought to myself, because it was an estate, you understand? So it was a gated estate, a very big estate, but a gated estate, very big houses. So everybody there, you can't stay there if you're not privileged. You understand? If you're not privileged, you can't afford the houses. So the first thing I thought about was, this person doesn't have any fence around this plantain or pawpaw. It's just outside their fence. And it was so quiet. And I just thought, what stops people from going to take this plantain and take it for themselves at night or cut off this pawpaw? And the first thing that came to my mind, it wouldn't happen here because everybody is almost equal in their earnings, in their education, in their social status. Nobody would do such a thing to go and steal plantain outside somebody's fence. That will only happen where there's no equality. So I said, those people are safe because there's equality there. A false equality because of the price of the houses. It doesn't reflect what's happening in the country. But once you leave that estate and you come out to the real world, you have to guard your stuff, especially in the city where you have people that earn very little and people that earn very much. So people that earn very much always have to guard their stuff because they are aware of a gap and inequality. So they know some people have never eaten plantain before. So when they see it growing freely, they are going to take it, sneak and take it. The church teaches us to share so that we don't have to live in this fear of inequality. The church was a safe place because there was no inequality. Not like now when you go to church and they're telling you, guard your phone, oh, there are people stealing here, oh, make sure you guard your iPhone. It shouldn't happen. Because there should be equality in the church. Because everybody shares. So the second thing you learn from the church is how to share. The third thing that the church instills in us that makes us better human beings for society is to support. We are to support. Church teaches us support. And I'm not talking about supporting the work of God. Because a lot of people can say, well, you have to support the work of God, so we make God so abstract. I would have you know that every human being is the work of God. There is no exceptional work of God. Every human being is a special work of God. And the church teaches us to support that work of God. Support each other. What does support mean? It means that when someone in the church is sick, everybody is aware of it. And they go and visit that person. Not only do they pray for the person, they administer drugs to the person. They buy fruit for the person. They check up on the person's daily health till the person gets back to full health. Support is when they realize a part of the church is having family problems, husband and wife, difficulty. They step in to mediate. They support the family back to love. Support is about knowing what is going on in each other's lives. Church is not a place of secrecy. It's a place of intimacy, where you are so concerned about the other person and saying, look, bro, you've been wearing the same shirt for the past 1 month. Is everything okay with you? Sis, you do not smile as much anymore. I see you. You are not smiling. You used to be a very cheerful person. What can we do? What is wrong? It teaches you to observe the human being and to know what is wrong with them and say, how can I help? That is what support is. Now we do not care. I've lived in the West before. I've traveled to the West before. And the support system is poor. We keep eulogizing their good health care. But why do people need health care in the first place? Because a lot of them are isolated. Your neighbor doesn't know your name, doesn't know where you work. They keep to themselves. They keep to themselves. There is no support. Everybody is isolated. Dealing with depression behind closed doors. Dealing with abuse behind closed doors. Everybody is in a world of their own. It started when they stopped going to church. They stopped learning about the tenet of support. These three things are the very reasons we go to church. It is hardly about the God outside. It's about the God in every single human being. This church builds human relationships. It fosters the strength of the human being, the spirit of humanity. That's what it does. When we stop going to church, the human spirit begins to die. Now, having said this, is the church the same? No, it isn't. Majority of the church has failed. It saddens me to say this, but it's the truth. A lot of people stop going to church because the structure of the church has failed. It is no longer built on these three things. It is no longer built on service, no longer built on sharing, and no longer built on support, which is highly, highly unfortunate. You see, Jesus came to break the temple mentality, the synagogue mentality, and to institute the church mentality. And what is the synagogue temple mentality? The synagogue temple mentality is the mentality that the devil is trying to institute again in society. That's why the church is becoming more unattractive to people, and people are saying, I do not want to go anymore. The temple and the synagogue are very legalistic places. They are not empathetic places. Number one feature of temple and synagogue is they are big and monumental. Incredibly big to accommodate a lot of people. People get lost in the temple and in the synagogue. People actually get lost. People get trampled. People lose their identity there. This is very contrary to what the church should be. The church should be small and intimate. The people should be seen and known. Identity should not be lost. Identity should be amplified in the church. In the synagogue, your identity matters not. You are a statistic. Isn't that how most churches that are celebrated today are? big, grand, with statistic of human beings, very few names known. If you do not hold on to your little child tightly at the end of church, that child would get missing. That is not how church should be. Every child is known. The child is not lost in church. The child is seen. Every detail of the human being is seen in church. This is how you can serve that human being. This is how you can support that human being. And this is how you can share with that human being. In a grand environment, sharing, service, and support becomes hard. And that is why people ask the question, can everybody serve? In a place where you have 10,000 people, everybody cannot serve. It would be chaos. So people are excused from serving. And then you have a small percentage serving. And then the spirit of service is not instilled in the other people. And so they go into society without learning how to serve. And then the people that are serving in church, look at how many people they are serving, and then the spirit of entitlement comes into them. They begin to feel like celebrities. See all the people when I sing, see all the people I'm making to wave their hands. See how much authority I have. The church should not be grand. The church is an intimate place where you serve, where you support. And where you share what you have. How can you share in a place that has thousands of people? Sharing becomes impossible. It's very hard to share. You cannot share. There are too many. So even when they share, what people now do, they don't share anymore. All they do is just take what they have and give to the man on top. We can't share this thing to go around, so I might as well give it to the main person. So we now have a main person on the pulpit who we give it to. And that's what we call sharing in church. So I have a testimony of something, a windfall I have had. I can't share with everybody. But to give it to God, I'll give it to this person, this man or this woman on the pulpit. So people feel a sense of injustice because the person on top, in quotes, gets bigger and richer, while somebody down there in the pews gets smaller and is suffering. And it becomes tormenting when you go to church every time you are listening to testimonies of people being awarded contracts. And it almost seems like they are taunting you because there's no sharing. They don't even see you to even share with you. This is how the church is failing and is becoming unattractive. And the spirit of humanity is dying. There is no equality in the church anymore. No equality. No equality in the church anymore. A lot of times, what you see is pastors living superstar lives. Superstar. Rockstar lives. The other day I was watching Instagram and the pastor was talking about a program that was about to come up. And he shot it in his garage. And in that garage, I saw nothing less than 5 cars. Highly expensive cars. And number one, I thought, what's the use of talking about a church program and you have to shoot it in the background of your garage with cars everywhere? I don't think there's a use. You can shoot it in your office. You don't have to do that. And then I wondered, how many of the people in the church, How many of them have cars? How many of them have this level of, because these cars I saw, they didn't even look like second-hand cars. They were in top range Jeeps, cars, 5. That's what the camera could show from the angle, but they could be way more than 5. No equality. That's why there's a spirit of covetousness in church. That's why there's stealing going on outside of church. There's no equality. The church is portraying the inequality going out in society. There are 1%ers right within church. So the spirit of capitalism has come into the church. So people say, what's the use of going here to experience capitalism when I experience it on the outside? That's why I'm having questions like this. Is there any need to go to church? The spirit on the church is the same spirit outside the church. There is no support in church. No support. We've heard so many stories of people that have been killed within church. Church had no idea that this person was being abused. No idea. The church had no idea. There's a story of this young man. They said he was a worship leader in the church and stuff like that, but then ended up being a serial killer, or maybe, let me not call him a serial killer because I don't think they've accused him of any other killing. But he killed a young lady, cut her body up, and they found him. Used to be in the church. Did the church know when he left to start with? Did they see him when he left? Because he must have left the church. Did they see him becoming unhappy, despondent? Did they see him battling and saying, bro, what's up? You're not the same. He must have started from leaving the choir to just sitting down in church and not coming for 1 Sunday, 2 Sundays, and nobody came to check for him. Nobody came to support. What's the problem? Did you lose your job? Can we support you for a year till you get back on your feet? And we accuse him of being a failed Christian. But the church failed. The church failed. Human beings will have up and downs. But if you do not catch them when they are down, they will die. This is what support is about. To understand that people rise and fall. You are meant to catch them when they fall. Nobody caught this man. Then he became a problem to society because he stopped going to church. And because the church stopped being the church became a synagogue and a temple. Grand architecture, small people. The church is important. Going to church is important. But the structure of the church must remain the same. It is not a place of building relationship with God. It's a place of building healthy relationship with the human who has God in him. Every human being out there is a God project. Is a place of knowing how to interact with the God project called the human being. And as I walk up this question, the first statement this person made was of a lot of concern to me. He started out by saying, I grew up in a family that was very religious and spiritual. Now this here is one of the turn-offs of the church also. A lot of us, the first encounter we have with the church is through our parents. And on this podcast, I've talked about parenting a lot. And parenting is the biggest assignment that man could ever have. Since I became a parent, there's no day me and my wife don't sit down and talk about how we are doing as parents. I've never had a bigger responsibility in my life than having these people under me. And I've said it before, when you are a parent, you are a God. You are God to your children. A lot of parents make the mistake of trying to teach their children, their young children, about God. That is a very fatal mistake. You cannot teach a young child about God. As a parent, your job is to show your children God. When they see you, they must see God. Young children have a very fuzzy concept of the spirit called God. It doesn't make sense to them. Their concept is mommy and daddy. You are God. You call yourself mommy and daddy. What they see is God. That's why every parent must model God. I've said it. Parents have 3 jobs: to teach your children compassion, teach them contentment, and teach them confidence. A lot of parents throw God at their children. You are God to your children. When a child comes to you and has a problem, do not say, go and tell God about it. You talk to the child about it, and you ask God for wisdom to talk to the child about it. Little children have a very fuzzy concept of an external God. That's why for that period when you're a child, even God relinquishes his position and says, for this period, you are my ambassador. You must act as God. It is not about forcing children to do devotion. It is not about forcing children to pray. It is not about forcing children to go to church. It's about you being an embodiment of love, an embodiment of wisdom, an embodiment of understanding, an embodiment of caring, an embodiment of listening, an embodiment of validation, an embodiment of affirmation. It is serious business to be a parent. It is a weak thing to force children. When you start forcing children, you have started failing. Forcing is a sign of failure. It is when you cannot tell yourself that you are failing. You do not teach your children about God. You show them God. That when they become of age, they come and ask you, Daddy, Mommy, how come you are like this? When other people are like this. When your children start to ask you that question, then you point them to the God that people do not see. Because then they are ready to understand. And then you tell them, it is not me. It is God. It is this person or this spirit or this entity that I have allowed to lead me. And that's when you start to teach them. That is when you start to teach them devotion. You start to teach them the need to pray every day. You start to teach them service. Teach them the importance of going to church, what church does for them. They will do it only too willingly because you have embodied it. You have become their hero. The church has failed because we have very bad ambassadors in the home that are more or less tyrants. And you want the children to grow up and want to search for that God that made you a tyrant. I think not. It is not going to happen. So in answering your question, church is absolutely important. You need to go to church. Yes, you're building your relationship with God personally. There's nothing superb about that. Nothing superb. That's how it should be. That's like saying I'm eating by putting food in my mouth. Nobody applauds you for doing that. That's good. But now you need to go to church. First of all, you need to find a church that has the structure of church. This is where there's an assignment, but I'm not fatalistic. They are still out there. The small churches, but we laugh at them. We laugh at them, but they got the original script. But because we laugh at them and some of them they are insecure, they aim to be big too and to build temples and synagogues. But look for a small church where they know your name and look for those signals. Is there service? Is there sharing? Is there support? Those churches will teach you how to be a better human being. Church is absolutely important. Somebody needs to hear that today. You cannot do online church. You can do it once in a while, but that doesn't, you cannot, all these things I've said about service, support, sharing, is it possible online? Ask yourself that question. Is it possible online? It's not. All you're doing is just consuming. So you become a consumer. You begin to learn the lifestyle of consuming and not putting anything in. We must find a church. Never be ashamed of a small church. If you are here listening, you are pastoring a small church. Oh, please don't be ashamed. Build it on these three things: service, support, and sharing. You are turning out more good human beings than synagogues and temples are. I'm telling you. My name is Tola T.A. Alabi, and this is the TA Podcast.